Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really honored to be here today and to speak to you at this very important event tonight. And I would like to start, of course, by thanking the organization forPEACE and the whole Elvanger family for organizing it, for doing so much to help Ukraine and the people of Ukraine since the start of the war and doing it like really every day. And thank you very much to all of you who came to this dinner tonight, because as you come here, you hear about Ukraine, and you hear about Ukraine and what's happening. And it seems like today, probably, what's happening in Ukraine is there's nothing more important in the world right now. And yes, here in the United States, like last week, the media and the whole public was watching some other important events, like the Speaker of Congress has been elected from the 14th attempt, I guess, right? And then in San Francisco and California, people right now are speaking about what about the horrible weather conditions and rainfalls, right? But you know what our soldiers in Ukraine, they say that they always invite people, come visit us in the trenches. In the trenches where on the front line, where in November, in autumn, they had not several inches of rain, but 1 or 2 feet of water level in those trenches. And right now, it's different. The weather is -10 Celsius, so it's really freezing, and they have to sleep there, they have to stand there, have to be there. Otherwise, if you just get out of there, you can be killed by bullet or artillery, whatever. So we are really lucky to be here in California or other parts of the United States, to be safe and warm. And but still, I really appreciate that you're coming here tonight to express your support for Ukraine and Ukrainian people. Because Ukraine, since 1991, for 31 years of independence, or restored independence, because historically we have a 1,000-year history, much more than Russia has. And we have been trying to live and develop as a peaceful country, independent and sovereign, independent from Russia, up until 2014, when Russia first invaded and occupied Crimea, started the war in Donbass. And then at that time, unfortunately, the world did not react so strongly. And Putin said that he could continue. And that's why in February 2022, Putin started this full invasion, absolutely unprovoked, senseless war against Ukraine. So, and next month in February is going to be 1 year of this war. And I'm saying this will be because there's really a little hope that Putin will change his mind and withdraw his forces, right? And also some hope, but very little hope, that Ukraine will be able to win so quickly. Anyway, we'll win definitely, but later. And and on the contrary, Russia is planning another way of attack. Despite the fact that the significant some part of Ukrainian territory is still being occupied by Russia, the Ukrainian defense forces managed to deoccupy or to liberate 52% of the territory which Russia initially has conquered or captured at the beginning of this war. And sometimes we hear the question, did really Ukraine outperform to Russians' expectations? In fact, Ukraine really outperformed Putin's expectations, outperformed US and Europe expectation about Europe, and even outperformed, let's be honest, our own expectation about ourselves, that we will be so able to be so strongly standing against Russia. Because Putin initially planned to capture Kyiv in 3 days, and that's true, by the way, because even after all the intelligence data, Ukrainian forces managed to get the information from Russian plans, which had been handed to Russian soldiers with the day and hour actions, and they were really planning to capture Ukrainian capital in 3 days. But now the result is that 300 days now, or even more than that, and what the result is, the Russians are not in Kiev, but they're actually digging trenches and building defensive structures on their own territory, because they're being afraid that we'll be able to advance to their territory. And so is it the result that Putin wanted? Definitely not. Now Sweden and Finland will join NATO probably very soon, and NATO will be closer to Russia than it was ever before. And Russia has already lost 120,000 of its soldiers, killed or wounded. And they will have to soon announce another wave of mobilization. They have lost more than 3,000 battle tanks, more than 6,000 armored vehicles, 2,080 planes, 270 planes, 260 helicopters. It's more than Russia has ever lost in any war, and probably than ever any country has lost after the Second World War, ever. And now the Russians are not using their airplanes on the territory of Ukraine other than battlefield because they're afraid it's going to be shut down by Ukrainian air defense. The air defense, which Russian propaganda said they have destroyed in the first day of the war. And by the way, of course, Russian propaganda is often very fun to watch what they're telling their own people. They claim now they have captured the town of Solidar. It's on the battlefield, while Ukrainian forces are still there. And they also claim that Russia has destroyed 37 HIMARS multi-launch rocket systems, which were donated to us from the United States, while in fact Ukraine ever received from the United States only 20 or less than that. But this Russian propaganda is effectively working on Russian people, unfortunately, and so on and so forth. And because the Russian people, they're used to live in this fake reality, like since Soviet times, and they're being told that the war against Ukraine is a war against NATO, and Russia, even though Russia openly attacked Ukraine on this 24th February, but Russian TV is telling that the United States and Europe is guilty of this war. And the expectations for mass protest in Russia did not meet reality. People have very different mentalities there than they have here and than they have in Ukraine. They're more like, a little bit more like slaves, you know? And prosperity without freedom is just another form of poverty. This is the well-known principle here in the United States, but people in Russia do not understand it. And Ukrainians are very different. We live by this principle. And that's the reason why our people have twice in the last 20 years protested against the presidents in our country who are trying to draw us away from democracy. And in 30 years, we have elected 6 presidents. And in Russia, it looks like Putin is just eternal or lifetime president. So, having lived in the United States for some time, I can tell you that Ukrainians, which much closer mentally and to Americans than we are to any other people, even to Europeans. And because we share the same values. And that's important to outline. And we Ukrainians are very grateful, extremely grateful for the help and assistance from the United States since the beginning of the war, because that's one of the reasons why we managed to survive. Well, let's be honest, before the war, United States was, of course, intelligence was very right that Russia is going to attack, but also US intelligence was wrong in its assessment of ability of Ukrainians to resist. But, well, eventually after that, we're getting significant help and support from US, and we're grateful for that. And what's important to mention that for some people here in California, in the United States, the amounts of help that are being published in the media, which are voted by US Congress, by both parties, by the way, might seem like a huge amounts of that. But first of all, this money, they're not being transferred to Ukraine or wide to Ukraine directly. They may mostly spend all military equipment, ammunition, and all of the systems. Basically, they stay here in the United States mostly, which is good for US taxpayers. But even this money which are sent to Ukraine, they're not just spent in vain or donated just in fact from the US government. These are really the investment into the world security system in which the United States is a leader, and in which there are some rules and they keep the system running. So if US wants to remain the world leader and maintain this security system established after the Second World War, then Putin really needs to be defeated and Ukraine needs to be supported, and this support needs to be coming. So there is no question about this amount is huge or not. Because otherwise, if Ukraine doesn't win this war, the world security system will be simply destroyed, and the guys like Putin will do and will attack whoever they want, will try to get any land they want without punishment and without any consequences. And because I hate to use these pathetic words, but it is true that Ukrainians are right now fighting for and sacrificing lives for freedom. Freedom not only in Ukraine, but freedom in Europe, freedom in the whole world. And in this fight, of course, we need your support. And this war is, of course, far from being over. Russia is planning another massive attack, possibly a new attack on Kiev. And even though Ukrainian soldiers keep joking about that Russian army will not be able to advance more than 2 meters after the border, and we ask into Ukrainian land, and they say no, 2 meters underground the Ukrainian soil, not more. But we are still taking it very seriously, and the announced supplies of new armored vehicles from some countries like France, US, and now today from Poland, the battle tanks, are very, very timely, very needed. Kremlin's statements right now about the ongoing attacks on civilians and on our critical infrastructure, as well as preparation for new wave of mobilization, testify to the fact that Russia still retains maximalist goal in its war of aggression against Ukraine, and Russia denies the legitimacy of our country as such, as a sovereign state, and maintain its efforts to destroy Ukrainian statehood. And active front line right now with Russian aggressor constitute 1,500 kilometers, while the overall front line for Ukrainian defenders, it includes Russia and Belarus, is right now 3,876 kilometers. So heavy fighting continues, especially in Donetsk and Lugansk regions, Soledar and Bakhmut being the hot spots. And the so-called unilateral Christmas ceasefire, which Russia cynically announced before by Putin, of course, it turned out not to be true, and as expected, a complete lie and a manipulation. Russian occupation, they used it to attack Ukraine again. In revenge for military losses on the battleground, Russia continues terrorizing Ukrainian civilians. The past months have been marked by intensive missile and drone attacks committed by Russia against Ukrainian civilians, critical infrastructure and residential areas. Right now, nearly 50% of Ukraine's energy system, most notably thermal and hydroelectric power plants, as well as high voltage network, have been damaged by Russian attacks. So my parents and my brother are in Ukraine, in Odessa right now, and they're suffering about 10 hours a day. They don't have electricity at all. And sometimes Ukrainian electricity companies, they switch off the electricity during the day and they switch it on back at night. So people, when they go to sleep, they feel, okay, right now we have electricity, so what do we have to do? Wake up and do our chores? No, probably. So people adapt, of course, but they don't have to because it's 21st century now. And there is a story when Ukraine managed to liberate Kherson in the south, and the Russians, when they were leaving the city, they blew up all the power networks there. So the young man was standing on a city square celebrating with his friends, and then the journalist approached that guy and asked what he feels about that. And he says, well, you know, we have been under Russian occupation for many months. Now we have no electricity, we have no water supply, we have no heat, but most importantly, we have no Russia here. So people are really can live with everything, but just not to have Russia on their land. So Ukraine, of course, needs peace, most of all, but we now say we need a victorious peace. And 5 conditions for negotiations with Russia, which were outlined by President Zelensky, are the restoration of Ukrainian territorial integrity, respect for UN Charter, compensation for all damages made by Russia, and punishment of war criminals, and solid guarantees for that such assault, such attack would never, ever repeat again. Until these conditions are met, any talks of peace, of deals with Russia are actually premature. Russia would simply use it as a respite to regroup, replenish its forces, and strike again. Because Russia's war, it's obvious, it's doomed to failure. And Ukraine will continue fighting until territorial integrity within internationally recognized borders will be restored. So no new territorial realities claimed by Moscow will be accepted. So would US, because would US, for example, sacrifice any part of US, like Alaska, I don't know, California, to stop Putin? I would think not. The same with Ukraine. We would never sacrifice Crimea or Donetsk or Lugansk. It's the same equally important parts of one Ukraine as like any other. There are rumors that now that Ukraine is being proposed by some important forces, a so-called Korean peace variant, right? Like new so-called 38th parallel, separating occupied territory from not occupied territory. But, well, we know that South Koreans right now say that agreeing 70 years ago to that plan, it was a mistake. Because now they don't have really guarantees of security. They have a constant threat from the North Korea. That's why we also would not agree to that. And eventually, the result of that should be that Ukraine should join NATO, and NATO would only benefit from that, because currently Ukraine has the most capable, experienced army in Europe, an army which has experience and courage. It is not afraid of Russia, and we are defending not only Ukrainian territory, but also the whole Europe, including Poland and other countries, because otherwise Russian tanks would be standing already on the border with Poland. And bravery of Ukrainians has become known to the whole world. Morale of our soldiers is very high, because they're fighting for their land, for their families, while Russians, their army morale is very low. They are fighting because they're ordered to do that. And they don't know what in fact they're fighting for. And that's why Russians are bringing to army right now the prisoners from the jails, the real criminals, offering them freedom after that. So those people who are like killers or rapers, whatever. And so the direction to which Russia right now is heading to is actually towards darkness. And this previous year, 2022, was probably the most difficult for our country, probably for everyone. Year of a lot of challenges, a lot of tests of our strengths, of our faith. We do not know what this 2023 will bring to us, but we hope that it will bring us peace. We know for sure that we need to, what we have with us is the faith, hope, and love. And that after every storm, it comes down. And we all have one very important mission for this planet, for this universe, to preserve and keep these values that we have, this Western world have, for our children and grandchildren. We all want to live in a future where light prevails darkness, and good always beats evil. And I would like to finish by quoting President Zelensky, part of his video address yesterday, which he's given at the Golden Globe Award ceremony. And he said, "The war in Ukraine is far from over, but we believe it's clear who will win. We Ukrainians, we thank all of you, free people of the free world, those who united around the support for free Ukrainian people, in our common struggle for freedom, for democracy, for the right to live, for the right to love, to give birth no matter who you are, no matter where you are, or where you're from. The struggle for the right of new generation to know about the war only from movies. The First World War was just claimed and brought millions of lives. Second World War claimed 10 millions of lives. So there will be no Third World War. Ukraine will stop Russian aggression on our land. And we will make it together with the whole free world. And we hope we will be together on that victorious day, the day of Ukrainian victory over Russia. So with God's help, it will be so. Thank you all very, very much. Please support Ukraine. Please stand with Ukraine. Please support and donate to organization forPEACE, because it does a lot of very, very important help to Ukrainians. Glory to the United States, glory to Ukraine, Slava Ukraini!